There's a mutiny unfolding inside China, but it doesn't look like anything the world expected. No protests in Tiananmen, no tanks in the streets, just millions of young Chinese quietly turning against Xi Jinping and letting the country rot. They've stopped working, stopped chasing careers, stopped believing in the future. And the terrifying part? This rebellion can't be crushed because it's silent, spreading and infecting China's foundations from within. This is the hidden uprising threatening to collapse the world's most controlled society, one young dropout at a time. But how did this happen? And how did a quiet, almost invisible rebellion become the biggest existential threat to the Chinese Communist Party in decades? Let's start with what looks like nothing, but it is quietly breaking China from the inside. Think rebellion needs violence? China's youth just proved you wrong. With youth unemployment hovering around 20% since the pandemic, something snapped in the collective psyche of China's young generation. But instead of rioting, they chose something far more dangerous. They simply stopped trying. The Jinping movement started with one man who loved doing nothing. After quitting his factory job, Luo Huzhuang biked about 1,300 miles to Tibet and discovered he could survive on $60 a month. His manifesto, lying flat is justice. He quoted ancient philosophers, comparing himself to Diogenes living in a jar. His post described sleeping in a jar and sunbathing like the ancient Greek cynic philosopher. Within weeks, millions embraced it. The phrase Jinping, meaning lying flat, describes a personal rejection of societal pressures to overwork and overachieve. No more 996 schedules, working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. No more chasing promotions that never come. No more believing in a Chinese dream that turned into a nightmare. And here's what should terrify Beijing. In July 2025, youth unemployment hit 17.8%, its highest level in 11 months. Just as a record 12.2 million university students graduated. That's an army of educated, disillusioned youth with nothing to lose. But wait, it gets worse. These aren't lazy dropouts. Many Chinese businesses demand employees work 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. The reward for this grinding existence? Salaries that can't even cover rent in China's major cities. One 24-year-old college graduate sent out hundreds of resumes, failed 2 civil service exams, and now has no income, no savings, and no social life. Young people face intense societal pressure to excel academically and professionally, with youth being shamed for underperforming in school or not working hard enough. But when working yourself to death guarantees nothing, why bother? The movement has evolved beyond just lying flat. A newer phrase, bailan, let it rot, means actively embracing a deteriorating situation rather than trying to turn it around. It's not just giving up, it's watching everything burn and feeling nothing. After years of preparing for tests and studying from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in high school, China's youth were trained for long working hours. But instead of accepting this as normal, they're rejecting the entire structure that created them. The government's response? Pure panic. CCTV news commentators criticized the movement, saying, "You can accept your fate, but you mustn't lie flat." Xi Jinping himself called for avoiding involution and lying flat in Communist Party journals. State media labeled it shameful. But here's the thing about silent rebellions. You can't arrest someone for doing nothing. If you think lying flat was radical, wait until you hear what's happening now. China's youth have invented something that makes Western quiet quitting look like child's play. They've literally become professional children. The hashtags full-time daughter and full-time son have been trending on Chinese social media, attracting millions of views. They refer to adult children who are hired by their parents to do housework and be available whenever needed. The going rate? Between 4,000 to 8,000 yuan monthly, or $500 to $1,100. Meet some real examples. Zhang, who ran a small business in Zhejiang province hit hard by the pandemic, closed shop and now works for her parents for 8,000 yuan monthly. Her job? Cook, clean, accompany them on walks. Another case, Cheng Wan, a 22-year-old marketing graduate who couldn't find any decent paying job, now earns 4,000 yuan monthly from his parents to clean, walk his sister to school, and run errands. He admits, "My neighbors consider staying at home to be useless." Lu Zhuan, 27, became a full-time child after her father's surgery, earning money for cooking, cleaning, and laundry, even though her parents are only in their mid-50s and relatively healthy. But here's what makes this revolutionary. These aren't failures living in basements. One full-time daughter, Zhu, receives 15,000 yuan monthly, far more than the typical 3,000 to 4,000 yuan most receive, and will likely inherit her father's company. A Duban discussion forum for full-time children has thousands of members, while the hashtag full-time sons and daughters has garnered over 3.1 million views on Xiaohongshu. The demographics are staggering. A record 3 million applicants competed for just 39,600 civil service positions in 2024. Despite available positions more than doubling since 2019, the ratio of applicants per job increased from 53 to 77. When government jobs, once seen as the ultimate security, become lottery tickets, you know the system is breaking. Primarily in their 20s, these professional children say they're different from Ken Lao Zhu, the generation that eats the old. They actually do housework in exchange for support rather than just freeloading. And parents? They're complicit. Chinese parents are often willing to support their children, happy to have an excuse to keep them at home. In China, parents are more emotionally dependent on their children, while children are more financially dependent on their parents. Sociologists note that China's traumatic pandemic experiences contributed to both young people rethinking life goals and parents supporting them. The desire to spend quality time with loved ones and contemplation about the meaning of life still lingers. This isn't just about individual families, it's about an entire generation rejecting the fundamental promise of modern China. Now, let me reveal something the Chinese government desperately doesn't want you to know: the real scale of this crisis. The term Tangping quickly got banned on all Chinese internet sites after going viral. But why such extreme censorship for people just resting? Because Beijing knows the truth. As many as 87% of people under 30 in China carry some form of debt, with risk of default rising with unemployment. These aren't lazy kids, they're drowning in financial obligations with no way out. During the pandemic, the term run studies gained popularity as people discussed ways to immigrate. Those who can't leave physically are leaving mentally, checking out of a system that checked out on them first. The cultural revolution happening is profound. Tangping represents a desire for personal autonomy and freedom from societal expectations, prioritizing personal happiness over external markers of success. After decades of being told that sacrifice equals patriotism, China's youth discovered that their sacrifice only enriched others. The movement led to forums with 200,000 members on social apps before being shut down, with Tangping t-shirts becoming bestsellers online before being pulled from stores. Every suppression attempt just proves the movement's point, that the system fears their non-participation more than any protest. One participant, a 32-year-old in infrastructure financing, described herself as half lying flat while working remotely from Dali. She believes, unless the society undergoes some structural changes, more and more young people choosing to lie flat will be the trend. The economic numbers tell a horror story Beijing can't hide. China's GDP grew just 4.8% in Q3 2025, the slowest pace in a year. But here's the shocking part. Fixed asset investment unexpectedly contracted by 0.5% in the first 9 months, something economists call rare and alarming. When investment collapses in a country built on investment, you're watching systemic failure. Property investment slid 13.9% through September, while economy-wide prices fell for a 10th straight quarter. Deflation plus youth rebellion equals economic death spiral. Here's where things get truly catastrophic. Remember when China stopped publishing youth unemployment data? Youth unemployment hit a record 21.3% in June 2023. Then authorities suspended publication, claiming they needed to improve statistical methodology. When the numbers returned, they'd magically dropped by excluding students entirely. But independent analysts paint a darker picture. Peking University professor Zhang Dadan estimated that if the 16 million young Chinese lying flat at home were included, China's real youth unemployment rate could be as high as 46.5%. Let that sink in. Nearly half of China's youth might be economically inactive. Over 200 million Chinese were involved in gig work in 2020, with more than 10 million working as food delivery drivers. More than 20% of drivers for the two major platforms have college degrees, and at least 70,000 hold master's degrees. Average monthly earnings for delivery workers reportedly dropped to less than 7,000 yuan, despite longer hours. Master's degree holders fighting for poverty wages. That's not an economy, it's a collapse in slow motion. The social contract is shattered. For 40 years, Chinese citizens accepted authoritarian rule in exchange for economic prosperity. Work hard, get rich, build a better life than your parents. But what happens when that promise dies? China's services industry only makes up 53% of GDP, below the global average and significantly lower than advanced economies like the US at 78%. There literally aren't enough good jobs for all these graduates, even if they wanted them. The Chinese government is implementing policies to divert talent from private tutoring, property tech, and finance towards sectors it deems essential, forcing many into fields they have no interest in. Imagine studying finance for 4 years only to be pushed into manufacturing. No wonder they're lying flat. Xi Jinping knows this could end everything. In 2025, the Cyberspace Administration mandated social media platforms censor expressions of lying flat and other negative worldviews. But how do you censor exhaustion? The propaganda machine went nuclear. State news companies labeled Tang Ping shameful, warning against lying flat before getting rich. Billionaire Yu Minhong urged people not to lie flat, asking, "Who can we rely on for the future of our country?" A Danfeng Daily op-ed called lying flat shameful, after which Luo's original post disappeared. The lying flat search function on WeChat was disabled, and a 9,000-member Duban group was deleted. But every crackdown backfires spectacularly. When CCTV News criticized the movement on Bilibili, it attracted thousands of mockeries in the comments. Delete one forum, 3 more appear. Ban merchandise, they make their own. In January 2024, government officials from several provinces were admonished and named and shamed for lying flat themselves. Even bureaucrats are giving up. The government's solutions are laughably inadequate. They promoted entrepreneurship and innovation, introducing policies to support startups as alternative paths to traditional careers. But you can't innovate your way out of spiritual death. Beijing elevated vocational school status and increased funding in 2022, trying to address cultural preferences for tertiary education over vocational training. Too little, too late. The Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security claims 12.56 million people found urban jobs in 2024, with unemployment at 5.1%. Nobody believes these numbers anymore. When your statistics become comedy, you've lost control of the narrative. Now, here's what Western observers miss. This isn't just about economics. It's about the death of meaning itself in Chinese society. The movement arose from China's economic slowdown post-COVID and the end of its growth miracle, factors that greatly impacted young people's perception of the job market and their future. But it goes deeper than job prospects. Research shows that Tang Ping contains elements of resistance toward social and organizational inequality, which may be seen as acceptable under unfair circumstances. This is a philosophical rebellion, not just an economic protest. The Chinese government fears that if widely adopted, lying flat threatens a country struggling with a slowing economy and aging population. They're right to fear it. In May 2021, the government announced couples could have 3 children to boost population growth. But who wants children in a hopeless society? The intellectual foundations are sophisticated. The original Tang Ping poster cited ancient Greek cynicism philosophy, comparing his lifestyle to Diogenes, who rejected material possessions. This isn't mindless dropping out, it's a philosophical rejection of modern capitalism's basic premises. Lying flat strikes at the heart of Xi Jinping's Chinese dream ideology of great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. How do you rejuvenate with a generation that refuses to participate? This rebellion is triggering cascade failures across every system. While Beijing censors hashtags, the real economy is collapsing from within. Manufacturing executives are panicking. Discontented workers forced into unwanted fields are notoriously less productive, with far-reaching consequences on China's economic landscape. You can't compete globally with a workforce that doesn't care. Worsening U.S. relations have led to decreased foreign investment in Chinese bonds, companies, and currency, with China's economic reliability being questioned. Now add millions of workers who won't work. Who wants to invest in that? Even more damning, the Rhodium Group estimates China's actual GDP growth in 2024 was between 2.4% and 2.8%, significantly lower than the official 4.8%. When independent analysts say you're lying about half your growth, credibility dies. The demographic catastrophe accelerates everything. China needs young workers to support its aging population, but those workers are vanishing into gig economy poverty or parental basements. The math is terminal. Individuals opting out of high-stress careers lead to less efficient allocation of human capital, potentially resulting in higher unemployment and reduced economic output. It's a doom loop. Less productivity means fewer opportunities, means more people lying flat, means less productivity. Local governments watch tax revenues evaporate as young people stop buying homes, cars, or anything beyond survival needs. Consumer spending, the engine China needs to transition from manufacturing, stalls completely. But here's the global shock coming. The phrase quiet quitting in the United States was thought to be inspired by Tang Ping. This is going viral across developed economies. China isn't unique, it's just first. When supply chains assume Chinese workers will always be there, always be cheap, always work hard, what happens when that assumption dies? Every smartphone, every circuit board, every piece of clothing depends on Chinese youth who increasingly don't care if your Amazon package arrives. The financial contagion spreads silently. Pension funds investing in China, assuming demographic dividends that no longer exist. Tech companies building factories for workers who'd rather deliver food. Real estate investment trusts buying into ghost cities that young Chinese will never inhabit. Harvard professor Yawin Li worries young Chinese may develop serious depression, having to postpone important life plans such as marriage and childbearing, or put their dreams on hold. But that assumes they still have dreams. What if they don't? But there's an even darker truth Beijing won't acknowledge. This rebellion has already won. The evidence is everywhere if you know where to look. Since July 2024, China's youth unemployment rate has remained stubbornly above 17%. Every government initiative fails because they're treating symptoms, not the disease. The disease? A generation that's discovered the system needs them more than they need the system. Consider the cascade of failures. Tertiary graduates face a services sector that can't accommodate them, while cultural preferences for university education have created a perception of vocational work as insecure and low prestige. So millions get degrees for jobs that don't exist, while jobs that do exist can't find workers. It's economic schizophrenia on a national scale. Oxford University economist George Magnus warns this may become permanent. If young people are not in the labor market acquiring skills and looking for better opportunities, they may then become unemployable. But here's what economists miss. Maybe that's the point. Maybe unemployable is the goal. The psychological warfare has already been lost. One participant explained, "I don't like jobs with fixed hours and refuse to work overtime. If I have to work, I'd rather have a part-time job that satisfies my basic needs." This isn't laziness, it's a complete rejection of industrial civilization's basic assumptions. Even more terrifying for Beijing, it's spreading upward through age groups. The unemployment rate for people aged 25 to 29 hit 6.6% in December 2024. The virus of not caring is infecting even those who initially escaped it. Once you see your younger siblings living peacefully at home while you're grinding 996 hours, the question becomes, why am I doing this? The financial sector sees it coming. Investment bank Natixis's chief Asia-Pacific economist said Beijing seems to be hiding the problem rather than addressing youth unemployment. When Wall Street says you're in denial, you're in serious denial. But here's the twist nobody expected. Parents are accelerating the collapse. Unlike the previous Ken Lao Zhu generation who freeloaded, today's full-time children actually contribute to households, making the arrangement sustainable and socially acceptable. Parents get companionship and help. Children get support and freedom. The only loser? The economy that depends on their participation. Some parents are even competitive about it, with one father paying his daughter 15,000 yuan monthly because he wants to keep her close before she inherits his business. When supporting your children's dropout lifestyle becomes a status symbol, you know traditional values have completely inverted. The global implications are staggering. This reduction of human resources has far-reaching consequences as discontent workers are notoriously less productive. Every product you buy, every supply chain you depend on assumes Chinese workers who care about their jobs. That assumption just died. Meanwhile, others see quitting without backup plans as opportunities to slow down and enjoy life. With one former engineer saying, "After quitting, I finally have a chance to take care of my physical and mental health." When mental health beats wealth, capitalism has no response. Here's the inescapable truth. This revolution is mathematically unstoppable. China's model requires infinite growth, endless work, and perpetual sacrifice. But humans aren't machines, and China's youth just discovered they can break the machine by doing absolutely nothing. Traditional incentives are worthless now. Offer higher salaries? They'll live with their parents. Promise career advancement? They've seen parents work themselves to death for nothing. Threaten punishment? You can't jail someone for staying home. Studies show that under low return expectations, Jinping behaviors are seen as more acceptable than effort-making behaviors. When society admits working hard doesn't pay, lying flat becomes logical. The tipping point passed quietly. The movements represent acts of silent resistance against societal expectations, demanding endless productivity while offering little return. Once millions normalize doing nothing, it becomes culture. Experts worry if youth remain in flexible work or unemployed too long, they may become permanently unemployable. But that assumes they want to be employable. What if an entire generation chooses not to be? Some officials offer empathetic opinions, with Beijing's Guangming Daily noting that to cultivate diligence in youth, China should first improve their quality of life. But China can't improve the life quality without young workers, and young workers won't work without life quality. Checkmate. Demographics seal the fate. Birth rates crashed. Marriages collapsed. Marriage registrations in 2024 fell to their lowest since 1980. No families means no future workers, means no economy. The cycle ends here. Young people describe their choice simply: I don't want to compete intensely with my peers, so I choose to lie flat completely. When competition itself becomes the enemy, capitalism has no answer. Xi wanted a Chinese dream. Instead, he created a generation that discovered the most powerful protest is no protest at all, just stopping. Luo Huzhuang, the movement's founder, now lives with family, reading philosophy and going to the gym, encouraging followers to think and express freely. That's the revolution's final victory. Not overthrowing the system, but making it irrelevant. They're not fighting the machine, they're just walking away, leaving it to rust. So what happens when the world's second largest economy runs on workers who refuse to work? When the factory of the world becomes a nation of full-time children? When the Chinese miracle reveals itself as history's greatest mirage? We're about to find out. Because this isn't just China's problem anymore. When a billion people's children choose poverty over participation, when an entire generation opts out of civilization's basic bargain, when doing nothing becomes the most powerful form of resistance, the whole world feels the shockwave. This is how empires really fall. Not with revolution, but with exhaustion. Not with violence, but with indifference. Not with a bang, but with a yawn. The mutiny is silent, the rebellion is passive, and that's exactly why it's unstoppable. What do you think? Is this the beginning of the end for China's economic miracle? Or will Beijing find a way to force its youth back to work? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Fall of Nations for more deep dives into the forces reshaping our world.